Astrology isn't a belief system. It just is. And it believes in you, whether you believe in it or not. I actually think astrology is one of the most empowering languages one can learn. It can connect you more deeply with your intuition than most things. I use it to surrender. Like every example I give is a deep surrendering. It's allowed me to trust the universe. It's allowed me to trust the unfolding. The reason I see astrology being like this new language I would love for the whole world to learn is because if the whole world learned it, they'd start paying attention. And then they'd start realizing they were way more psychic than they realized. And then they will realize it's not actually the astrology, it's them actually just paying attention. How could that not be magical when you have like the map to the universe and you see it playing out constantly? I love using astrology to make the energetic currents present to people, but in a way that tells them you're invited to hop into that energetic current. It's not just going to naturally happen.
Welcome home to the Loving Consciously podcast.
My name is Amaris.
And my name is Eric.
And if you are like us, nobody taught you how to love.
We are best friends and life partners here to vulnerably and authentically share our 7-year journey to unconditional love.
Our mission is to help you learn how to love consciously in all of your relationships so we can journey together towards a more effective, intentional, and fulfilling way of giving and receiving love. Loving consciously.
Together, we have overcome neurodivergence, mental health, addiction, pregnancy loss, infidelity, and grief. After 6 years, the lack of knowledge on how to heal or love each other through these challenges led to our separation.
After us both spiritually awakening and recommitting, we built our new conscious partnership founded on unconditional love and a commitment to personal growth.
Thank you for joining us as we put it all out there to show you the duality of our love's pain and beauty.
And remind you that you have both the capacity to love consciously and the power to always choose love. Namaste and welcome back to the Loving Consciously podcast. I am so excited to be here solo today to welcome a beautiful and magnificent guest. We are going to be talking about astrology today. I do want to acknowledge that for the first time, my partner, my co-host, is not here with me today. He has a lot of work that he's doing, and he's actually meeting with the partner of the person that is on this show today. And so we're going to do this solo and just create some feminine magic and talk about love and astrology and spirituality and all the fun things. So without further ado, I am honored to welcome Rachel Varitimos, my sweet Taurus friend, the day after her birthday, to the show.
Oh, thank you. And you forgot to mention we have the same eye color too. We're also eye color friends.
We are, and that's special because we have like really rare eyes. They're not even really a color. They're kind of just like hazel green, all kinds of colors. So yeah, eye twins too. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of today, can you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do? And maybe just like a general level of kind of what astrology is. Like, let's just assume someone doesn't know, just like a base level intro.
Yeah. So I'm Rachel and I'm an astrologer. And what I do is I help people understand their birth chart and I help them understand the energies that are present in the sky for them currently, this year, in the past. And what I find with astrology is it's a really great tool to find self-acceptance, but also learn how to surrender to life and also learn how to take life by the balls. Like, I don't talk about astrology in a hope and pray way. And I actually think it can be really damaging to use astrology in a hope and pray way. I know a lot of people are really into horoscope apps and like wanting to know what's in the cards for me this month or this week. And they want to know exactly what's going to happen. And it's almost like people, and I used to do this is why I know this, people can use astrology to control their life and to just be like, well, will life get better? Like, let me look at my horoscope. Okay, my horoscope says it might get better. Okay, I'll just go with that. It's going to get better. But then you don't do anything to change your life. And so I love using astrology to make the energetic currents present to people, but in a way that tells them you're invited to hop into that energetic current. It's not just going to naturally happen. So one of the ways I look at astrology, which I think is different than other people, is I always think of the scene in Finding Nemo when Nemo was going to go find his dad. And he was like, had to go all the way to Australia. And it's a really far journey because I think he's in America. Is that where Nemo was? I don't know.
I think so.
Yeah, I think he was in America. So what Nemo did, he's found this current, this like riptide that was taking all of these fishes and turtles really quickly. And he hopped in the riptide and it like spun him out to Australia and he got there a lot faster. And that's how I look at astrology. Is astrology, there's these energetic currents going on in the air. There's this energy flow that's happening. And you can either resist it, which I think is when a lot of people come up in frustration in their life and when they become a victim to their life and it feels like just life's never going their way because it's mainly they're just not surrendering to the universe's pull and the lessons they're meant to learn. Or you can understand that those lessons are being played out right now, those energies are being played out right now, and you can hop into the current and allow it to bring you to the growth that it's trying to bring you to, and a lot faster. So I like to say I use astrology to make quantum leaps in your life, which quantum leaps are not for the faint of heart. They really do require you surrendering to the universe and feeling the hard feelings, but accepting that the universe knows better than you and that there's a lesson to learn in everything. And so that's how I like to use astrology. Astrology at its basic level. So we all know how the moon affects the tides, right? Like we have high tide and low tide. So astrology at its basic level is showing how the planets in our solar system are affecting Earth. I almost think of them as like the puppeteers in the sky. The ways the planets move around in the sky, it's almost like they're causing different angles and energetic magnetic attractions to one another. And then that creates a certain current in the sky, and then it then affects us. So there's planets in astrology. I look at planets as like the key players in the sky. So if we think of the sun, a lot of people know the sun, for example. The sun is your life force energy. It's the core of who you are. It is your authority. It's your success. It's your leadership in this world. But it's not all of you. It's just a part of you. So whatever your sun sign is, like if you're a Taurus sun, like I am, for example, then those leadership, authority qualities, the core of who you are is more Taurus like. But then there's a bunch of other planets, like there's Mars, that's how you take action and assert yourself and what you're passionate about. There's your moon sign, that's your intuition, the physical health of your body, your inner emotional world. It's actually our subjective reality as kids too. We typically relate with our moon sign as kids more than anything. And then there's a bunch of other planets. I'll just like leave it there for now. But basically, each of these planets represent different actions in your life. The way you do those actions are described by the zodiac sign they're in. And then if we take it a layer deeper, there's also something called houses in astrology. And the houses in astrology each kind of correlate with each zodiac sign, and they represent different areas of your life. So it's like the planets represent the action in your life. The zodiac sign represents how you take that action. And then the houses represent the area of life in which you take that action. I hope that answered all of your questions and was clear.
It did answer all my questions, and thank you. I love so much listening to you talk. I've seen and heard so many astrologers, and you just like have a way of making it succinct and accurate and positive and healthy. And that's one thing I was thinking of while you were talking. I just kept hearing this word like spiritual bypassing, right? Like we see this a lot in the spiritual community. Like anything can be used to bypass, but you're right. Like people will look at their horoscopes or their chart and be like, oh, well, it says this, so that's just going to happen. Or, oh, it says not to do this thing, so I'm just going to not do this thing, and kind of use it as like, yeah, like a bypassing type tool. And so I love so much that you brought that up. And I also really like that you mentioned the flow of life and like moving with the flow of current, because I think a lot about like destiny and fate and like, is everything written in the stars? And the way you explained it is so clear that like it's energy, right? Like it's guidance and flow for us to work with. We, of course, have free will, right? Like we don't have to work with that. And the more that we resist, the more suffering that comes. I love how you equated all of that to like, this is an actual tangible thing that exists out there that can help us move forward and move through our growth and not have so much resistance to life. You know, something you do is like you cast charts and try to figure out like aligned days to launch things or to make certain decisions in your life. And I think of millions, honestly, countless times in my life where I've been like trying to do something and for no reason at all, it's just like banging your head on a wall and it's not aligned, right? It's out of alignment. And I can't help but wonder if that isn't like because of the stars and the energies and whatever was playing, like it just wasn't the right time. Doesn't mean you can't do it. Like you can sure force your head through that wall. You can get a jackhammer, right? There's a million ways to make it happen, but it's much easier when the wall's not there. So I love all of that so much. The only thing I want to clarify, because I didn't know until you told me, can you go deeper and just explain what a birth chart reading is?
Yeah. So, okay, a birth chart reading is like a snapshot of the blueprint of who you are, past, present, future, and all of the potential possibilities that exist within your life based on certain energetic archetypes that are in different levels of intensity within your chart. The way I look at astrology is there's 12 zodiac signs and there's 12 archetypes. We all know archetypes. People talk about working with archetypes all the time. Like I've taken a lot of tantra classes and people will talk about like Lakshmi and like Isis and all of these different goddess archetypes that people will work with. And because you know about that archetype, you know that the energy that they embody, the way you work with a goddess in a tantric practice would be to understand that archetype and then imagine yourself in it, imagine yourself playing with it, right? And so in a sense, what we're doing when we do that is we're tuning into our own intuition and our own psychic senses of what that energy feels like within us, and then we do our best to act it out, right? When I think of astrology, we have all 12 zodiac signs within our birth chart. Every single person has all 12 zodiac signs within them. Like I know you're a Pisces, but you are also have Taurus, you also have Aries, you also have Capricorn. You have every single one within you, and so do I. In a birth chart, we have each of these archetypes within varying degrees. So if you're a Pisces sun, the sun has more weight in a birth chart. So there's going to be more of that Piscean energy within your birth chart. So when I'm describing someone, I'm going to talk about that Piscean energy, but then maybe you have a bunch of planets, because planets are like the players within your birth chart. You know how I said one could be for how you take action and how you're passionate. Another one could be how you like to receive, your love language, how you like to give love. It's like all these different players. You could have a bunch of those planets within one zodiac sign. So you could be a Pisces, but you could have a bunch of planets in Capricorn, for example. So you would have that Pisces energy within you, that archetype, but then it's also mixed with this heavy Capricorn archetype in all these different ways, like all these different parts of you have this Capricorn energy to them. So then when you read a birth chart, it's almost like taking these different energies, these different energetic amounts. I'm almost getting this image of you have like 12 levels of something. Let's just
I'm
say there's
seeing like those music, like the music things where there's like the meters. What is I don't know
that's
what
what I'm
that's
seeing.
called. Okay, I
That's
got
the
the same
image.
image. Yeah.
So
Like the
you're seeing
music mixer buttons that move up and down. Yeah.
that's what you're seeing. So I want everyone to imagine that each zodiac sign is one of those mixer buttons that's like a chart that's rating how much of that you have in you. When you look at a birth chart, it kind of is like that when I'm reading it. When I look at all the planets and I look at the angles that are made, it's almost what it's happening is I'm seeing the different variations and combinations of each energy within you. And then just like when you meet someone, and maybe they remind you of someone else you know because you know that archetype, and you're like, you remind me a lot of this person. Because they remind you a lot of that person, you now have all of this other information about them because you know this other person, you know this archetype, and they act like them. And so you can now assume this person will act in this way, or will do this thing, or will maybe this happened when they were a kid because this happened to your friend when he was a kid, and that's why he acts like that. That's what happens when I read a birth chart. Is it, you have all 12 zodiac signs within your birth chart. You have different planets placed in different zodiac signs. That's giving me information on how energy presents within your world. But then also each zodiac sign within your birth chart rules a certain area of your life. This is where it goes on people's rising signs, like why people's ascendant and rising signs can tell so much about them, because the rising sign will set up what zodiac sign rules each area of your chart. So I'm a Libra rising. So my identity is ruled by Libra. My identity is ruled by considering other people and like being really fair and getting justice and like kind of being indecisive, because like I'm always putting myself in other people's shoes. Well, then after Libra, Scorpio rules my second house. So, second house in astrology, we can go through all the houses if you want. It's a lot though. The second house in astrology is how you make money. It's your self worth, it's your skills, it's your relationship to money and money management. It's, yeah, right. Money, money, money. It's your material possessions and all of those things. So like the material world, right? Financial security. When Scorpio rules the second house, the way I deal with money is a very scorpionic way. So I can be kind of secretive with the income that I make. I also always want to figure out ways to like optimize my money. So I get into taboo and occult ways of managing money, which, you know, we were just at Confluence. Like I'm into all of the financial law. Like that's totally taboo law, you know?
I'm completely shocked right now. Can you tell? I didn't even get to mention, number one, I love so much that we just like had a joint vision. Like we both saw that music mixer, like what are the odds? But I didn't even get to mention like that's where we got to connect was at Confluence and just again like how knowledgeable you are on this. I can hear just as you're sharing and something that's kind of transmitting for me as you're talking is I think a lot of people in the general population, right? They look at astrology and they're like, "Oh, I'm a Pisces." Right? Like that's what I am. And they just like read about Pisces and they identify and they become so attached to just like their sun sign. And we're multidimensional, right? In every aspect of the universe. And so, of course, in astrology, it's like you're actually all of them in all these different ways and they govern different things. And I feel like that's really at its core the benefit of getting a birth chart reading is understanding like you're so much more than your sun sign. Like I'm not just a Pisces. And I thought that for a long time up until maybe like 2 years ago when I started to dabble in astrology. I was just like, I'm a Pisces. And people would be like, well, what's your moon? What's your rising? I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so just bringing that knowledge and awareness to people that, you know, astrology is real. Like it's a real thing of using energy in the cosmos, not using it to bypass and using it to like benefit our life. And then understanding that it can give you so much wisdom and knowledge of who you are and like how you can better interact with the world that is around us. Before we get into talking about love and relationships, I want to ask you the question we ask all of our guests. And obviously, we know you are in a conscious relationship. And so I'd love to ask and hear your perspective on what loving consciously looks like in your life.
To me, loving consciously looks like always taking responsibility for my triggers when they come up while also allowing myself to get triggered. And what that used to mean was I'd get triggered, then beat myself up, and then like eventually take responsibility, and then we'd get better. Or it maybe take years to take the responsibility, and the trigger keeps coming up. Now I'm realizing, oh, allow myself to get triggered, because to me, loving consciously now is the strength to admit I was wrong and to allow myself to feel the depth of a feeling instead of stuffing it down or bypassing it or trying to grow in the moment past it. It's like I've noticed the more I allow myself to go into it and explore the depth of why I'm getting triggered and then take time apart. This is one of me and Ryan's like go to how we argue. We get triggered, we fight, we notice it's not going anywhere. All right, the next step, take time apart. I'm going to go on a walk. You go in your office. Now it's step 3, self-reflect. Where did I get triggered? And like, even though no part of me wants to take responsibility for this trigger because I want him to be wrong, I want him to be the idiot. Why am I getting triggered based on what's happened in my earlier life? Does this remind me of my dad? Does this remind me of being like gaslit by my dad or my mom? Like, and now I'm projecting this onto him. And maybe the pattern is repeating too, right? Because we tend to attract people like our parents, but then it's still not blaming him because it's still not his freaking fault. So at that point, then it's like taking the responsibility for why I got triggered, apologizing. And I shit you not, every single time one of us takes responsibility and apologizes and just takes the weight off the other person and takes all the blame on ourselves, the other person will end up being able to see where they needed to take responsibility. And to me, that's loving consciously, because one thing I've realized being in a relationship with Ryan, I used to think that it makes sense. You're in a relationship, you guys are fighting, you can't get past it, you break up, you move on to the next relationship. Now I'm realizing I actually think it's a really good idea to stay in a relationship as much as you can, because if we don't transmute whatever we're feeling with this person, I've found that that same thing just happens in the next relationship. You think it's always them, but then you have to start questioning, where is it me? You know? And I noticed, because me and Ryan have been in a relationship 7 years, there have been times when I'm like bored, or it's not fun to have sex anymore, or I'm not attracted to you now, or it's this, and I want to blame him. To me, loving consciously is recognizing I have felt this way in previous relationships. How can I take ownership for why I feel this way about him? Which I found it's because I was emasculating Ryan in my head, which, oh, look at that. My mom does that to my dad. And I did that in all my previous relationships. No wonder I wasn't attracted to him anymore. And so it was like the moment I made a conscious decision to stop emasculating him in my head, but to look for the good and realize I'm not perfect either. He's not perfect. I wanted to have sex with him again. Like, duh, you know? And so to me, that's loving consciously is consistently reflecting back on where we can take responsibility, consistently reflecting back on where this is a pattern and it's my responsibility to take care of this pattern, not the other person's. And I would say committing until it's truly the end. And I actually believe the end of a relationship is when one of the people don't refuse to grow. Like, that's when I now believe is the end of a relationship. But as long as you're both willing to grow and evolve, I think that that's where all the magic is.
I actually got emotional when you were talking. That was beautiful. And I love so much that you focused on yourself, right? Because that is loving consciously. That's the secret sauce, is it's really all about us and our internal work. And I also love that you mentioned triggers, because I think I told you this, but for anyone who doesn't know, Rachel is in a partnership with Ryan Sprague, the conscious cannabis coach who we've interviewed on this show before. And when he was here and we were interviewing him, he talked about that and said it's just triggering each other into enlightenment. And I just love so much y'all's partnership and just how like deep and authentic it is, and how deep and authentic you are of like, this is not all unicorns and rainbows. Like that's what Eric and I talk about on the show all the time. Relationships are hard work. And we talk a lot about how we live in this culture, in this world of like project out the blame, end it and run away, and like go find something new and shiny. And then people are just stuck in this wheel. Like I spent years and years just relationship after relationship, never more than like 2 years. That was like my sweet spot. And then it was like, woof, this is too much. I'm gonna go find something new. And when we can really do that work for ourselves and start to take accountability and start to make inner work our number one priority, you're right. Like, I don't think there is an end. I told Eric the other day, I was like, this is just it. Like, this is just it for me. Like, there's nothing, and we've been through some shit, as I'm sure you and Ryan have, there's nothing that would like be a deal breaker for me at this point. You just would have to work through it. Everything's a reflection of, our internal reality. And so it would just be a call for more work. So I love so much that you shared all that. Thank you. So getting into a little bit more about relationships, I'm just feeling really called to dig in there, because I think, y'all have been together for 7 years, we've been together for 8 years, and how can astrology help us in our relationship? What magic is there to be uncovered? Because I think a lot of people approach astrology from a very like personal and selfish type of way, and that's okay, right? Like it's your birth chart, it's your life, that's to be expected. But what is there to be offered when we start looking at relating? And I will caveat that for our listeners of, as you know, on the show, when we say relating, we're not just talking about your romantic partner. Relationship is everything. We're in conscious relationship with ourselves, with our, our bodies, the earth, society, our partner, our family, our friends, etc. So how can it help us to relate better, to relate more consciously, to relate more lovingly?
Oh, so many ways. I'm just trying to think of like the best place to start. I suppose since we just talked about taking responsibility, I'll give an example of how you can use astrology to take responsibility and to know when to keep pushing when you're in one of those fights where you just want to die because you've been in a fight for like 3 or 4 hours and you're just like
That
crying.
never happens to me. I don't know what you're talking about. You're like, I know that this is stupid. I know this is my ego. I'm freaking miserable and I just won't quit. And you're exhausted, you're tired, your voice, you're hot. It's like the worst experience. It's literally like children. We're just a bunch of children, a bunch of 3-year-olds running around trying to like relate. It's quite comical after the fact. Not so funny when it's happening.
Exactly, it is. But I know those scenarios all too well. Gosh, me and Ryan have been locked in a car for 9 hours, or we've had a 9 hour fight that then was resolved because we were locked in a car for 9 hours. But
You literally just needed to pull over and get out of the car.
exactly. So yeah, I can think of an example that happened recently. It was a few months ago. So Ryan used to have this story that he could only have big cries, like big releases on psychedelics. And this moment was the day that he was completely proved wrong. And we realized relationships are the psychedelic experience. So we were in a fight for like 3 hours, not getting anywhere. He storms off to his room. I storm off to my computer, and what I do when I'm stressed is I look at astrology. So I'm just like, what's going on in the sky? Help me out. Give me some guidance. And that day I looked at the sky and I saw that Pluto was making a trine to the moon. And anyone listening to this, Pluto is the planet of death, rebirth, transformation, our deepest psychological traumas. And it's also the home of where we grasp and control in our life. You know, when we're like obsessing over something needing to be right and you just like can't let it go. And you're like, no, no, no. It could be almost seem like that anxious attachment style. When I saw Pluto was making a trine to the moon, I was like, oh, there's some intense transformative energy in the air. And I know times when me and Ryan have gone through our deepest transformations have kind of been in this energy of like deep gut wrenching feelings. And so, because we had taken time apart, I thought, well, Rachel, this could be an opportunity for you guys to have a really deep release of some sort of trauma. So you could go back in there. And then I thought, well, how would I go back in there in like the most optimal way? And I thought I could go back in there and just listen to him and not say shit. And
What?
just, I know. And just,
The feminine going in and not saying shit? I don't understand.
well, I also was thinking how Pluto's enshrined to the moon and moon's the feminine. And it's like this,
Mhm.
I was like, okay, well, my feminine energy, my feminine presence can be supportive for this deep Pluto transformative energy. So I went in there not wanting to, but I said, hey, just like, I'm here. I want to work through this. Like, just tell me, you go, and I'm just going to listen. And he starts talking and he talks and talks. And at first I feel a little trigger and I just breathe. And I'm like, let it go. He keeps talking. And then all of a sudden, he starts talking about his dad who passed away when he was like 23. And it's like this turn of events where it was about us. And then it turns into him and his dad. And then he just starts bawling his eyes out, like literally like ugly crying. I'm hugging him because I have this whole realization, holy shit, this fight wasn't about me. And he has this realization, holy shit, this fight wasn't about us. And he just cried for like a long time. We were in there for like 40 minutes, I feel like. And then he cleared it out. He felt so amazing. And we realized how much we loved each other, how grateful we were for each other. We even forgot why we were fighting in the first place. But that's an example of if I didn't have astrology to tell me that there was some deeply transformative energy in the air and some deeply controlling, like obsessive energy in the air, and that this was an opportunity for us to go through one of those deep transformations, I probably wouldn't have gone back in there. And I could have just kept staying mad. And then we could have returned to that fight in a couple months. And it could have just never been fully resolved. But when you see opportunities like that in the sky, like it gives me a reason to go back in and to just shut the fuck up. Can I swear on here?
Sure. You can do
Okay.
whatever you want.
And then like that was super transformative for us. But I think about that moment all the time. Like I don't not you know what I'm saying? Like I wouldn't have gone back in there unless I knew that was going on in the sky. So that's one example. Number two, through learning about Ryan's astrology, like I just understand how to interact with him more. And I understand what he needs and what he needs to hear and what he wants in our relationship. And one thing about me is I don't like people giving me advice, especially if you're my boyfriend or my parent or my friend or just anyone close to me. I just don't want your advice. I think I just have this like really, maybe you relate with this. I have this really deep belief. I'm like, if you're in my life as my close friend, we're mirrors for each other. So I don't want your advice. It's like where my mind goes. I'm like, you're too in, you're in this with me. So no.
You're biased. You're too close. And
Yeah.
also, like if I don't like your advice or it doesn't work out well, then I can't blame you. So it's just better to just not. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
So I just like typically reject people close to me's advice. So I try to take it now that I know certain people's astrological sign and that it's really meaningful to them. For like 6 years of our relationship, I just would refuse advice from Ryan. And I learned that Virgo moons and Virgo risings, but specifically Virgo moons, really need to be of service. It like actually provides them emotional fulfillment. It actually makes them feel safe. And so one day I decided to ask Ryan something stupid that he could be of service for me because I don't usually want help with anything. But I was like, I'm going to try this out. And I remember I just asked him one day if he could help me with something, and he jumped up and down for joy. He was like, "Oh my God." He's like, "You actually want me to help you with something?" He's like, "I've been waiting for this for like 6 years." Like, and he was like, he was so happy. And so it's like things like that that can help improve your relationship. There's something called composite charts within astrology, which basically takes your chart and your partner's chart and can meld it into one. And then it makes one new chart. And then you can see like the core of your relationship, how it's meant to play out over this relationship. Like me and Ryan's sun in our composite charts in the eighth house, which is about depth and transformation, which has been totally our relationship. That's a few examples, and I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, thanks so much for all of that. I definitely can relate to what you're saying. Even to this day, I don't check astrology like that. And so when there's moments like that, I wouldn't go in that room, right? And those beautiful opportunities that could be missed of, again, like we said in the beginning, understanding the energies of the cosmos and understanding the energies of what's going on and how you can work with that. As you know, at Confluence, you were looking at Eric's chart. And for anybody listening, like the core 12 kind of like signs, you know, the moon and the sun and the rising and all that, Eric has 4 Scorpios, which is like brutal. And I mean, I've had to learn to love, obviously, the Scorpio side of him, but like he is just so freaking Scorpio. Like he's as Scorpio comes. And for me, I'm like double Pisces, double Libra, double Aries. I have 4 doubles. And you can really see in our charts, like you were saying, how we can love each other better and how we can know each other better. Like you said, you know, how you've just learned that Ryan likes to be of service. And something that came through when you were talking about that is like we know things kind of run in cycles of 7. And Eric and I's relationship really started to transform around that 6 year mark. I heard that kind of similarity because you're coming up on the end of that 7 year cycle. You know, you're kind of moving into that next phase of like, are we going to commit for another, you know, 7 years, even if it's not consciously or like verbally? I do believe energetically and spiritually, we kind of know that. And so right around that time is when just like major transformation started happening for us too. So I love that that pattern played out for y'all. I also didn't know that you could create a co-chart. And so we're definitely going to be doing that with you now. Do you offer that if like listeners, I know you do birth charts, but do you do those as well?
Yeah, I think that they're really fun.
It's super fun. So moving from maybe a little bit to relationships and kind of moving more towards ourselves and kind of our inner work. Well, I want to ask some questions about astrology first, but what do you think is maybe like some of the common misconceptions you hear or things that maybe the masses and the general public believes about astrology or not aligned notions or perceptions of astrology that you've heard?
I have my favorite one, which is people think astrology takes your power away, and it's couldn't be farther from the truth. And that's because people don't get what astrology really is. They think it's a hope and pray divination tool, like I said in the beginning of this episode, which that would take your power away to be like, oh, this is going to happen. I don't have to do anything. Okay, like let life do that. Or it's also like people think it takes your power away because it tells you who you are. Astrology never puts you into a box, and astrology is not a belief system. I actually heard another astrologer say that the other day, and I loved it. So I'm kind of stealing that part from her, where she said, astrology isn't a belief system, it just is. And it believes in you, whether you believe in it or not. I actually think astrology is one of the most empowering languages one can learn. And the reason being is because it can connect you more deeply with your intuition than most things, because it is literally the language of the right brain. So we were just talking about all these different archetypes. There's infinite possibilities within an archetype, and energy can produce infinite manifestations, right? if we're going to think into an archetype, though, it's not a logical thing. It's not like this archetype is this, and this, and looks like this, and is that. It's more right-brained, right? It's more creative, it's more imaginative, and it's actually where our intuition lies. And so I've found that the more you learn astrology, the more you pay attention to your astrology, the more you learn about your birth chart, and then you start to become aware of yourself. The more you learn about other people's astrology, and then you start to notice how that plays out within them. Like you even just mentioning, Eric has a lot of scorpionic energy and he is very Scorpio. You got that because you're observing him, you're feeling into him. There is more than one sense going into that. It's not just words in your brain. You feel it from him. You can see it in him. You can probably sense it in him. You can probably smell it off of him. Do you get what I'm saying? Like it becomes, it actually includes all of your psychic senses. And so I've actually found the more people understand astrology, the more attuned their psychic senses become. And actually, it's not that astrology is telling us who we're going to be or what's going to happen. It's that when we are seeing a certain pattern play out in the sky and we then look at all the different energies, we then feel it. This is how I, as an astrologer, do it. I then feel into all of these energies and make a conclusion based on my intuition. It's not that the sky is telling me what's going to happen and what the deal is. It's that I know an energy, just like you understand scorpionic energy from Eric. So if you saw that energy, you could see it in someone else. It's now a pattern. It actually has turned on your intuition. And you can then probably predict about that person because they remind you of Eric. You know what I'm saying? So it's the exact opposite of taking your power away. It actually connects you deeper to your intuition. It connects you deeper to all of your psychic senses. And it allows you to feel into different timelines in your life. For example, if I'm going to say Jupiter's about to go into Gemini over the next year, Jupiter is the planet of luck, growth, and expansion and blessings. And Gemini is the zodiac sign of learning and knowledge and our siblings and writing and communication. So we could say over the next year, there's going to be a lot of people learning new things and growing and expanding from learning new things. There's going to be a lot of people communicating what they believe because Jupiter is about belief systems and sharing their belief systems, and the collective is going to grow and expand through these belief systems. I'm making these predictions, but it's based off of how I understand this planet combined with this sign. It's very much not taking anyone's power away. It's tuning into what I know to be true, my own felt senses, and then being able to make a creative story I can then share to the collective that sounds like a prediction, but is actually me honing into my intuition through using these archetypes.
I was hearing two words as you were talking. So I want to talk about the first part about kind of taking the power away, and then we'll dig into the intuition. You know, in the beginning, we talked about how some people can use astrology for spiritual bypassing and just kind of being like, well, you know, it's in the stars or it's not in the stars, so don't need to do it, or it's just going to happen for me. I don't need to co-create that. And that's the word that keeps coming to me when you're talking about power being taken away, as is with everything in this universe. We are co-creators, right? It's using this in a way that is a co-creation tool, not using it in a way that's bypassing, not using it in a way of like, oh, I have no power and oh, well, this is in the stars, so I guess I just don't have any control over my life, right? It's co-creating with the energies of the universe, which is what astrology is essentially what I'm hearing you say, right? It's
Yes.
like the energies of the universe written in the stars, if you will. And the second part of that around intuition, I love that. I've personally never heard anyone equate astrology to intuition. And I love, my favorite thing about you, number one, is how positive you keep everything. You're all about positivity, but you're all about empowerment. I love your content on Instagram because you're just always talking about like, how can we use this to empower ourselves, right? It's so easy to look at something in astrology. We see, you know, retrograde, for example. I feel like retrograde is a perfect example of this. Like, oh my God, Mercury's in retrograde, everything's gonna suck, right? Like a lot of people take that attitude and that mentality and don't co-create that reality of how can I use this to my advantage of, for example, the way I understand retrograde is like things kind of move back. Maybe this is an opportunity to take a step back and like examine and revisit. And so that's just like more of that co-creation, I feel like. And as far as the intuition piece, everything's energy in the universe. We know this. We love Tesla, right? Energy, frequency, and vibration. And using and reading and tuning in to astrology and to the stars and the cosmos to build intuition like that just, it's blowing my mind because I've never heard it before. And it's so intentional and it's so beautiful. And God, source, creator, whatever word the listeners may use for the divine, I'll just use God because it's easy for me. God literally gave us this tool. Like all we have to do is like look up and all of this beautiful history and energy and archetypes and all of this stuff is written in the sky, and we can use that to co-create, to build our intuition, to manifest the life that we want. I hope listeners are starting to kind of see like that is what astrology can do for us. And that's really powerful. And I think we're in, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I feel like we're in a resurgence of astrology. I feel like it's gaining momentum and gaining understanding and respect. Has that been your experience?
Definitely. I definitely, especially since we're moving into the age of Aquarius and Pluto in Aquarius, and Aquarius rules astrology. I actually believe we downloaded astrology from noticing patterns from our own intuition. Like if we think about like why do
Mm.
we know about the sun and the moon affecting the tides, we observed it. And then we became connected to it energetically. Like we didn't used to have weathermen back in the day, but because we weren't connected to technology and we were living in nature, we were more connected to nature, and people could feel the subtle change in energy and be like, "Oh, a storm's going to come in 2 hours." It's the same thing with astrology. That's what I mean by it's not a belief system. It's a collection of data from our intuition, from us when we used to be connected to the subtleties of energy a lot more. We used to be connected to the whole world, like nature.
I don't think I've told you this. Eric and I went to Belize at the start of last year, and we rented a car and we drove the entire country and we went and saw ruins, a bunch of like really ancient and beautiful and unique Mayan ruins. And one of the ones that we saw, I do not know the name, but it's really famous. People could definitely look it up, was I, I'm trying to find like words to describe what this was. It was essentially an entire community in ruins that was built on and around astrology, literally just like earth and stone. That's all it was. And they had like dials and markers, and they perfectly aligned with all of the signs, all of the like they would know the time based on that. And I mean, it just the moon cycles, the eclipses, like they had literally taken all that we know of astrology today and then some, and like built it on the ground with stone to be able to read it. So based on the shadows of these stones, you would know like where things were astrologically. It was mind blowing. And I didn't have the appreciation for astrology I have now, so I can imagine going to see it now. But you're right, like this is ancient stuff. And, back then, like we think they didn't have, computers and phones and all this quote unquote technology that we have, but they had that. They understood the basics of that. This stuff has been around for I don't know how long, thousands, millions of years. Who knows, right? Like we don't even
Mhm.
have an accurate reading of our history anyways. But just like seeing that is clicking for me, hearing you talk about, yeah, just like how ancient this is and how I love that you say we downloaded it. I've never heard anybody say that. Like we downloaded this into our consciousness, but obviously this has been around for a really long time. And that just triggered that memory of just seeing this magical stone astrological map on the ground that these ancient Mayans were able to build.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like literally the thing is, we're all psychic. Like we're all downloading things all of the time. Like I remember you even told me, I think you said to me at the festival something about how you just like know if people are bullshitting you and this. It's like, we all get psychic information. We've been taught not to trust it. And we've also been taught not to pay attention. And I think the reason people aren't connected to their intuition or their psychicness is because they stopped paying attention. And the reason I see astrology being like this new language I would love for the whole world to learn is because if the whole world learned it, they'd start paying attention. And then they'd start realizing they were way more psychic than they realized. And then they will realize it's not actually the astrology, it's them actually just paying attention. And it's just like a conduit for them to pay attention to. Actually, when you're talking about the Mercury retrograde, I just thought of such a great example of what you were talking about. So, my best friend, Kim, she just launched she relaunched her podcast, and they're having this really big podcast. It's a really well-known podcast producer producing their podcast. They hired them a couple months ago. She picked a date to launch their new podcast. It was during Mercury retrograde. I helped her pick it. It's not actually always a bad thing to launch during Mercury retrograde, especially if you're planning on launching it again and again and again, like a program you plan on launching again, or a podcast you plan on rebranding again at some point. So it's not always the worst thing to launch during a retrograde. But what ended up happening was that company, that big podcast producing company, got sold recently. And so the people that she thought she was going to be working with, she wasn't working with anymore. And I talked to her on the phone today. She's like, yeah, I'm just so frustrated. I feel like I have to fire them. And now I have to rehire this guy that used to produce our podcast. And she's like, damn it, I wish I just like never went with them in the first place. And I reminded her, I was like, well, you launched during Mercury retrograde and we picked that date for you specifically. Did your episodes go well? She's like, yeah, they went amazing. Everyone loves them. And I said, okay, so it's literally just this podcast studio that you're having to review, Mercury retrograde, review. And now it's the post retrograde shadow. It just ended on Monday. And I said to her, what if you had to have gone through these retrograde lessons in order to get solid in how you're producing this podcast? Like you wouldn't have been this solid, because now she's more solid than ever in her plan to how to produce the podcast. She like figured out all of the things. She knows exactly who she's going to now. She feels more in control of it. She feels more creative again because it's not into someone else's hand. And I said to her, if you didn't launch during Mercury retrograde, and then have to go through this experience of these people effing up a bunch of times when you're paying them a lot of money, you wouldn't have felt as solid as you do now. If you just went with this other plan, yeah, it probably would have felt good. But if you don't have that comparison creates even more solidity. And so then she ended up realizing, oh, launching on Mercury retrograde ended up giving her all of these lessons. And now she feels even better about the show that she launched on Mercury retrograde because, yeah, the episodes went well. And now she knows exactly how she's going to produce it going forward. So I also think like just using astrology in that way, like to me, it's like using as acceptance and surrender. This is what I mean by going into the flow of the current. You launched this bitch during Mercury retrograde, something you were going to have to review to get better, to get right, to get more solid. And now you're there. Like you're not like now it's actually anchored in. So yeah, I just thought that was an important example to share when it comes to using it to surrender to the flow of life and to empower yourself.
I love that example. Just a side note, what a beautiful friend. Like what beautiful advice to give someone to hold that mirror, right? That's to me, that's loving consciously when we look externally, right? It's like holding up that mirror in a loving way to be like, hey, let's reframe this or let's look at this from a different perspective. I think of my friendships and my relationships, even 3, 4, 5 years ago. And most people in that scenario, right, would have been like, oh yeah, that fucking sucks. Like, I'm so sorry. Like that's so upsetting. Like you deserve better. And it's well-intentioned advice, right? But it's unconscious advice. And so I just want to offer that reflection to you that I think that's really beautiful advice. And I love how you use astrology in every area of your life. Right. Like we've now covered yourself, you've covered business, you've covered friendships, you've covered your relationship. And so you can see it's just like so diverse in where it can be applied. You mentioned, and I think this is a really great thing to talk about because we are in pretty wild times, right? We could say politically, technically, energetically, astrologically, I think every single thing has aligned, and we can all agree that we're living in a bit of chaos right now and a really change and transformative time. I think that's a word you use a lot, is transformative. And you mentioned moving into the age of Aquarius, Pluto moving into Aquarius. Can you explain a little bit? I feel like, especially when it happened, right? It was just all over Instagram. It was all you could see on social media. Like, at its core, what does that mean, and how can people use that to their advantage this year?
What that means is Pluto is the planet, I've mentioned this before, of death, rebirth, but it's also the planet of power struggles. It's the planet of where shadow, dark entities have come in and created a power struggle, and now the truth is coming to light. That's what Pluto is about. It's about the real raw truth that's buried underneath a bunch of dark shit, basically.
Which is
Anytime.
not applicable to the society we live in at all right now, right? Like the truth coming to the surface. Hallelujah. I'm ready for it, but sorry, continue.
No, I mean, Pluto also rules Scorpio, so you know the energy. It's they're, you know, what happens when Pluto leaves a sign is we get all of the gifts from that last 20 years of transformation from where Pluto was just at. So Pluto is just in Capricorn. Capricorn rules governments, hierarchies, big business,
A lot
being
of
in a,
the like traditional 3D, I guess we could say like old world type stuff, right?
yeah, regulatory agencies, people who are an authority over you, people who create, like the World Health Organization would be like a Capricorn type thing. Any organization, right?
Boo.
Yeah, boo. So what ends up happening is Pluto was doing this thing in Capricorn. And it was like gain power and control, hide secrets, create structures, disempower people, reach goals, obsess, get on top. Like those are all the voices of Pluto and Capricorn since 2008. Now that Pluto is leaving Capricorn, moving into Aquarius, and yes, it's going to leave Aquarius again this last quarter of the year. We're going to get our one final push in Capricorn because it goes back and forth before it officially leaves a sign. But what's going to happen is we end up seeing all of the gifts, all of the truth, all of the clarity come out over those 3 years after Pluto leaves a sign. So what's happening now is we're seeing the truth come out about our government, the truth come out about the World Health Organization, the truth come out about celebrities and all these different rings and like all these different people who are in power and authority. Because remember, Capricorn rules authority, Pluto rules power. Capricorn rules being on the top of the hierarchy. So we're having all of these truths being revealed. And over the next year, I actually see it's like a dismantling of hierarchy. It's a dismantling of the powers at be because the truth is being shown. I'm not saying this is going to be a pretty thing. This is kind of like Pluto's kind of like ugly death and rebirth. Like, come on, you know? So those are the gifts we're going to be seeing over the next 3 years. And as those gifts come out, as we start seeing the truth about government agencies, as we start taking our power back and realizing that these people who have placed them on top of us are not actually in power, it's false power. As we do that, we're then slowly transitioning into Pluto and Aquarius, which means Pluto's about obsession and Aquarius is about we all have a gift to share. So as we're like getting rid of the hierarchy, we're like, no, we all have a gift to share. Now we're all obsessed with the collective coming together and bettering humanity and everyone's gifts this and technology and how can we make our life easier and how can we be more efficient for the future? How can we think outside of the box? And so now with Pluto and Aquarius, it's almost like we've gone from power struggles within hierarchy because we were obsessed with reaching our goals and being on top to power struggles within everyone being in equality. And I'm trying not to get political. So I'm trying to explain this in a way that's not political, but it's almost like communism versus capitalism, where like I think the last 20 years since 2008 was power struggles within capitalism. And now it's like we're all equal. And now it could be power struggles from all of humanity coming together, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It can also be power struggles within groups within different belief systems because Aquarius rules different groups and associations. So we could see a lot more like communal living coming about, where it's like my community is better than your community. And it's like obsessiveness with communal living. But again, Pluto always has that shadowy toxic side. So over the next 20 years, what we might see is like these communities then having power struggles within each other. You know what I'm saying? And being like, who's the best community? Who's the most sovereign community? Who's the most free community? I'm more free than you. And it could also be power struggles within technology. I think we're already starting to see that with like the AI, like the deep state stuff coming out with all like the fake advertisements. That's Pluto and Aquarius. It's literally using technology to better the future. We're obsessed with technology, but it's also the shadow side and how it's not all truthful, how it's a little bit like hiding things behind the scenes and not being clear. But I think along with Pluto being an Aquarius, since Pluto is obsession, I think that we're going to start to become obsessed with things like astrology, with different, like with new scientific inventions. I really hope astrology doesn't become some big like power struggle, guru, cult type thing over the next 20 years. That could be a really sour way Pluto and Aquarius moves. And right now we have Neptune at the 29th degree. And when Neptune is at the 29th degree, that can be like basically cults, like cults forming. Because Neptune and Pisces can be a very like cult type energy. Neptune dissolves borders and boundaries, and it can be very much about like a cult leader needing a cult leader in power. So I'm hoping that we don't have any like weird cult stuff over the next 20 years, but we're going to be all obsessed with everyone shining their gifts, coming together for humanity. But I also think that that can have power struggles within it too. So one more thing I'll say on this. If anyone has seen a chart of human history, and as we've gone through the ages of the zodiac signs, there's this chart where it's like, I think we started in Pisces or Aries, and it's like Pisces, and it's got like a straight line. And then when we move to the next zodiac sign, because as we all know, we're moving into the age of Aquarius, right? We were in the Piscean age, we're moving into the age of Aquarius. Anytime we move from one zodiac age to the next age, when you see an energetic ticker for how they've monitored the energy of Earth, the energy starts going up and down really rapid whenever it changes signs. It goes up and down and up and down and up and down, and then it smooths out again as we get completely into the age. So we're kind of in that like up and down energy right now of like kind of being tossed around, thrown around until we enter the age of Aquarius. So I actually don't think we'll enter the age of Aquarius for probably like 100, 200 years. Like it's going to be a wild ride until then.
Ooh, I'm thinking of, everything that I know and have studied, and just content that's been my journey this last year is like learning truth, right? Capital T. And the thought of that being 100 years is a bit daunting, but something I was thinking about, I was actually looking up the definition of the word obsession, and of course someone somewhere decided that it had this negative connotation, which kind of annoyed me, but I digress. I don't think obsession has to be a bad thing though, right? Like you touched on, really good things can come of that obsession. It's all in moderation, which I guess obsession, maybe it can be in moderation, but it's in a healthy way. Like, can we be obsessed with personal growth? Can we be obsessed with vulnerability? Can we be obsessed with authenticity? Can we be obsessed with the commitment to truth? Can we be obsessed with equality and equity and moving into a hierarchical society and not a hierarchical society? I think that there's hope, right? And I will say it again, like something I love so much about you is how positive you keep it, but also how grounded and realistic you keep it. Like we have to take both. Like that's just life. We agreed to come down into this dualistic, well, what we perceive as dualistic 3D reality to evolve our souls, to experience the highs and the lows and the darks and the lights and I'm kind of like swaying back and forth of like this tug. And I feel like you were saying with the ups and downs, like that's where we're at right now. We're really in this tug of like moving from one age to the other and chaos, and people may not agree with me or agree with that word, but like that is my perception of where we're at right now, and definitely where the next 3 years are going. Like a lot of chaos, but chaos is magical, right? Chaos is alchemical. Like chaos is the energy of the feminine. It's through that chaos, and I just like I'm kind of seeing a cauldron and just like stirring up the muck, right? Like all this muck's at the bottom. We got to stir it up so we can like filter it and get it out of there. It's just really beautiful that astrology can help support us. And I feel like, like you said, we're going to see a resurgence of that. And I'm seeing a resurgence of that. And so I think that's great because I think this can really help us, and we're going to need all the help that we can get. So if we can start to use the stars and energy and the earth and all of these different things to help, it'll just, like I'm always saying, make it a little quicker and a little easier to get where we're going.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to add to what you even just said is like, yeah, we can be real and raw about astrology, and I will be real and raw about astrology. Like, we're about to go through some shit, and there's always an empowering way to go through shit. Pluto is the planet of taking everything away, of darkness, but it's also the planet of empowerment, of where humanity's power lies. If we didn't just go through the last however many years since 2008 when Pluto was in Capricorn, if we didn't go through that hierarchical shadiness, we wouldn't have been able to recognize and realize our true power. If we didn't have our power taken away, we can't recognize our power. It's the same thing as that story I just told about my friend. If she didn't have this like situation happen with this podcast producer, she wouldn't have felt as solid in this plan. We need that polarity. And the thing about Pluto energy is it's sink or swim energy. And so I actually see this next age as like a wave, you know, just like a tsunami. You can ride the tsunami and you can like go with it and allow it to take you to like, I don't know, the next beach, and like you make it over it and you like rode it and you found the power. Or you can allow the wave to like tumble you under and bring you to the depths in the bottom of the ocean until you like drown and then don't come back up. It's a choice, and it
Free
all,
will.
right? Yeah, it's free will and you get to surrender to it. So my hope is when you heard all of this, whatever happens with Pluto and Aquarius, with us leaving Pluto in Capricorn, that you find your power within it, because that's the point. It's the point's not to be a victim, it's to find your power.
Preach. Mic drop. You said it so perfectly. I love that you said if you hadn't had your power taken away, you really wouldn't even know you had the power, right? And then you wouldn't have the power to take it back, which makes you more powerful. I also love that last piece of it is a choice. We have a choice in everything that we do. We have a choice whether or not to use astrology. We have a choice in how we view what's happening. We have a choice always. And the tagline of this podcast is always choose love, right? And I really feel like astrology can help you do that. For people who are, let's just say, brand new to astrology, or maybe they're not brand new, maybe they're just not at the level you're at, which most people aren't, let's be honest. What do you recommend for people getting started in this? Like, what do you recommend? What do you not recommend? I know you briefly mentioned like the horoscope apps, which I've definitely gotten away from. They don't personally resonate for me. But what's your advice for people that are hearing this and are inspired or are into astrology and want to go deeper?
I will say personally, I really do believe that everyone should get their chart read by at least one astrologer, or even if you just get, I don't like type outs. I don't like type out readings. I think that that has the power to possibly, I don't want to say take your power away, but I just believe in co-creative birth chart readings. I believe in being with the person, having your birth chart read, and when they explain the energy to you, you then reflect on how that feels in your body and what it means to you. And then that then propels the reading. It continues to feed the reading. So I do believe it's really important to get a reading. And I say that mainly because it was hard for me to grasp the truth of it and gain awareness of myself and how the astrology actually was intricately playing out within me until I got my first reading. And so then it was after I got my first reading that then it was easier to go into all of the placements and understand what they meant. If you don't want to get a reading right now, what you could do is you can download the Time Passages app. And I always say download the Time Passages app because then I just think it gives a great breakdown of all your planets, your signs, and what houses the planets are in. And what you can do is find out what planets, what signs all your planets are in, and go on Google University and look up that planet and that sign. So if you have Mars in Libra, go look up Mars in Libra on Google University and see how it applies to your life, or YouTube University. I think there's so many great YouTubers out there. Yeah, I would say look at all of your placements, look at what signs rule each house. And I know this might be over some people's heads for me to say that. That's why I say get a reading first, because you can ask your astrologer like how this is all broken down. I just think that's the best place to start. But otherwise, just look at, even on CoStar, if you download the CoStar app, it will tell you like, oh, you have this planet and this sign in this house. Go on YouTube University and have someone explain that sign and house for that planet to you. And then I usually like to listen to a bunch of different people on one aspect of my chart. So if I'm looking at my moon in Pisces in the fifth house, I'm going to listen to multiple videos on having your moon in Pisces. And then I'm going to listen to multiple videos on having moon in the fifth house. And I think this is important for people to hear because you're going to get a different interpretation from different people. And the more interpretations you get, you can see what lands like truth in your body, and you can actually tune into what's true for you. And then once you learn enough about that placement, you can come to your own conclusions, your own intuition of how that's true for you.
I love that. And two things that really stood out to me.
Mm-hmm.
Number one is like doing it, maybe not in person, right? We live in a digital world, but like doing it verbally and not just like a writing or an email. I really think, and this is something I love about you and Ryan, that you constantly reflect and remind me and encourage me to do, is like you always send voice messages, because words and writing and text and email and all of this stuff, I truly believe we have evolved out of that. It doesn't serve us anymore. Like it definitely has a place, if you're like scheduling something like technical stuff, but when we move into like emotional and spiritual and educational, like written is not serving us well. And the more that we evolve, the less that that's going to serve us. And when you're talking about something this important and this intuitive and this energetic, doing that via writing, for me personally, doesn't feel resonant. So I love that you mentioned that. The other word that came to me was diversification, which we usually think of like money, but we should be doing that with everything in our lives. I see so often in so many areas, but especially in the spiritual space, like people get one opinion or they follow one guru or they have one astrologer, they have one whatever. We are all like infinite expressions of the creator. There's many, many different avenues and many, many different opinions and transmissions, if you will. And so I love that you said, like, find what resonates as truth in your body. Like, energy doesn't lie. That was kind of what you're talking about at Confluence. And I was like, I just know people, when people are bullshitting me, because that part of my energy is very attuned and I can feel when things are out of that. And so you will know, especially as you work with that and you develop that, you will know what resonates as truth and like what doesn't. And someone else may be consciously or unconsciously, I'm going to assume positive intent and say it's most likely unconsciously projecting their experiences, right? And their beliefs, their perspectives. And so definitely always diversify in everything that you do. Get 5, 10, 15 opinions, always at least 2 or 3. I would love to kind of wrap us up here, and I want to ask you, what is your favorite thing about astrology? What has astrology brought to your life? Like, I know it's deeply impacted you. I know that it's deeply impacted your relationship, but like, what do you feel like is the biggest gift that it's given you and that it's brought into your experience?
It's funny because I feel like a slight emotion coming up as you ask that. What has it given to me? As someone who deeply controlled their life, a lot of their life, I'm talking like struggled with eating disorders a lot of my life. I was an obese 9-year-old. I didn't used to talk. Like I had deep control issues. It's why I didn't talk. I just felt too confused up until I got to college. So I just kept it shut, no mouth. I was like, I'm not even going to try talking. And I used to have so much fear. I'd wake up every single morning in fear of myself, of life, of what's going to happen, of this, of that, and needing things to go a certain way. And when they didn't go that way, getting really upset and having all of these missed expectations. And what astrology did for me is it allowed me to release all of that. Like I am the least controlling person now, and I'm the most surrendered. I never even understood what surrender meant until I studied astrology and actually started following it and surrendering to it. And so that's number one, is it allowed me, just with all the examples, even if you've heard me talk about examples throughout this whole show of how I use astrology, like I use it to surrender. Like every example I give is a deep surrendering. It's allowed me to trust the universe. It's allowed me to trust the unfolding, number one. Number two, it's allowed me to trust my intuition because it's helped me pay attention. Now I can trust myself more than ever because I start noticing patterns and energies. It's like, it's no question in my mind that if I feel something going that way now, it's that way. Whereas before I was so in my head and controlling and not aware, but very like just stuck in my head. When you're stuck in your head, you're not aware of anything, and then you think you're not intuitive at all. And you can't even trust yourself. You can't even make a decision. And so being able to connect it to how things feel and then make a decision based on that, I rarely second guess myself. I mean, I definitely do second guess myself still because I'm a human, but like compared to who I used to be, I have so much trust in myself and the universe. That's number two. Number three, everything is now magical. Like literally everything is magic. People tell me since I started talking about astrology, I seem like a child, like my inner child's come out. It's because how could it not when literally astrology and everything is magic? Like I know people's charts and then I see them acting a certain way. I'm like, that's so that chart. Like I know I know on New Year's, we were at our friend's house in Virginia and we were going to have this party. We have this party where we were all going to like have a dance party and whatever. And so they asked me to look at the energies of the night. And I look up the astrological energies and I'm like, ooh, this could happen. I was like, this could be a little spicy, but then this could happen. And then I like came up with like all of these scenarios. And then that exact scenario played out that night. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, that's so crazy. Like, how could that not be magical when you have like the map to the universe and you see it playing out constantly? Or if you know how the energies are playing out that day and you're feeling like a piece of poop and you know the energies are telling you to feel like a piece of poop, I feel a lot better about feeling like a piece of poop. At that point, I'm like, well, then what's the lesson, bitch? Because clearly I'm supposed to learn a lesson now, you know? So it's made me be able to take everything with so much lightness and so much fun and like a game. Those are my reasons.
That was the most beautiful emotional roller coaster of a ride. First of all, I love you. Thank you for bringing your authenticity and your vulnerability. You freaking nailed it. You really like your inner child does come out. Like you found your spark. And I think that fundamentally, I won't talk about other astrologers. Like just talking about you, that's why you're so good at this. And that's why you're the first astrologer that I've really like deeply resonated with. I mean, I resonate with you as a human and a friend far before an astrologer, but that's just a nice bonus. But it's so authentic and it's so like you love it. You keep it positive and you're just dedicated. Like the amount of knowledge that you have. And I also love too how you're like, oh, this and this and that, because you totally did that the whole conference weekend. You were like, whoa, this is in your house and this is that and this may happen and you should just I love it so much. I would love for you to share how our listeners can connect with you, how they can get a birth chart reading, what that process looks like, and just really encouraging everybody listening to be open to this magic. I love that word that you used. It is magic. I mean, the whole universe is magic, but we all have that path to find our spark. And maybe, just maybe, astrology can help you, if you're listening, find that spark, or at least help guide you into a path to that spark, or help maybe you get out of where I spent a decade of my life just slamming the head on the wall because everything that I was doing was out of alignment with where I was supposed to be, similar to you in trying to control everything. But yeah, if you could just share, how can they connect with you? How can they get a reading? How does that process work?
Yeah. So right now you can connect with me on Instagram. I am slowly attempting to get off of there. So who knows if I'll be there on another year, another few months, another 6 months, or I'll be off tomorrow. I don't know, but I would say connect with me on Instagram right now. It's at Rachel_Varitimos.
Can
I
you spell
recently,
that? I'll put it in the show notes, but just in case, can you spell
yeah,
that for people?
it's RACHEL_V as in Victor, ARIT as in Tom, M as in MO, S as in Sam.
I love that you said M is an M. I also have to do that with my last name. Like people just can't. It's Dutch and there's like this super un-English, not normal in America spelling. So I love that you have that because I do the same thing. But yes, Rachel_Varitimos. And I'm gonna totally interrupt you and plug you and exalt you to where you deserve to be exalted because your content is not like a lot of other astrologers' content, right? Like some of them, it's like very short and it's real clickbaity and teasy and they don't actually tell you anything. Like you get on and do like several minutes, 5-10 minutes, and you do lives and it's every day and it's just again so positive and intentional of like, yep, this sucks. Here's what you can do with it. So definitely connect with her on Instagram. I'm obsessively watching it all the time and I think there's a lot of value there.
Thank you so much. Yes, and that's why I started a podcast because I very much like long form content because there's so much to say about astrology. So, if you want to listen to my podcast, which I hopefully will 100% transition to as my main media source, it's the Astrology Magic podcast because obviously that's how I think of astrology. So, it's to help you make more magic in your life using astrology. And I'm going to be giving horoscopes on there, not the disempowering horoscopes, but the horoscopes of telling you the energetic currents, the energetic weather, what you can do to hop into that current. And I talk about a bunch of other things that I use, how I use astrology in my life, and that you can use it too.
I'm crying and beaming and my face hurts because there's an energy and and it's authenticity really is what it is at its core. But when someone is like living in their dharma, living in alignment, living their authentic truth, there's an energy and it's just undeniable. It's palpable. And you just launched it. You're being very modest. You launched this yesterday on your birthday. It's beautiful. I love the graphic. It just like if I had to put magic in a graphic, that would be it. So definitely can't wait to see what comes of this show as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, you can listen to that show on my Instagram. You can book a birth chart reading with me. So I do 75-minute deep dive readings and I do 30-minute readings. I recommend getting a 75-minute reading, especially if it's your first reading. The 30-minute readings, like you think that I'd cover a lot, and we do cover a lot, but the 75-minute ones are like that you really get the juice that you need. The 30-minute ones I think are better for if you want like a me to pick a certain launch date for you to launch things, or you want to know like one or two questions about your next year or about you or your career or something. The deep dive readings are like all about you, like where you came from, where you're going, what you're releasing, what you're heading towards, like your North Star, your biggest wound, your medicine. It's like all of the things. So you can book that with me and then you'll get a recording. We'll do it live on Zoom because, like I said, I only do it as a co-creative experience. And then I also have my retreat coming up. So it's the Goddess Getaway. This is my 7th time hosting this retreat, and this is my first time making it very astrology focused. And I'm really excited because for each woman, I'm going to spend a good amount of time creating a whole like packet for you over your whole birth chart, and also like what to expect for the year ahead. So it's going to be telling you like what you're going to be healing over the year ahead, what you're going to be releasing, what you're going to be moving into, what you're going to be transforming, what gifts you're going to be focusing on. And the reason I'm making that packet is because my bread and butter at my retreats is we manifest as a group. Because I find when you manifest as a group, like you are 99% likely to get those manifestations. It's mind blowing. Have you done group manifestation before at retreats or something?
At retreats, no, I would argue yes during Breathe with Cannabis, which your lovely counterpart is involved in. You know, a lot of the energy moving in each month they have a topic, like it might be authenticity or relationships. And so that was when I started doing those last year, that was like my first experience with that. And that is potent. Like we are
Yes.
powerful, and then when you bring a group of people putting their intention together, it doesn't like if there's 5 people, it doesn't 5x it, it like 5,000 x's it. It's like quantum.
If 5,000 X's it, and when you're at a retreat and you're soaking in each other's energies for like 5 days, and you're also really getting into your body and into your senses and into your intuition, and we manifest from that space and we do it all together and then we pump each other up, and it's like something we're doing daily, it becomes real fast. And one of the things I'm excited about this next retreat is we're going to be using this packet, like this guide, this astrological guide for you specifically for the next year to manifest off of. And so I'm really excited about that. I'm like, oh, it's my new cool idea that I have, and I can't wait to implement it. So that retreat's going to be in Sedona in October.
Which is
Um,
like, we just spent several weeks in Sedona. Beautiful, magical vortex place if you haven't been.
It's beautiful. It's my 3rd time hosting a retreat there. This is my 7th retreat, and 3 times I've done it in Sedona just because it's become my favorite place to host my retreats because of the energies and all of that. And then I do one-on-one coaching. If you want one-on-one astrology coaching with me, you do have to get a birth chart reading first. I don't really talk to anyone about the one-on-one coaching until they get a birth chart reading with me. But the one-on-one coaching is basically like I'm your in-pocket astrologer, and we meet a couple times a month. You get a lunar return chart every month, and a lunar return chart is basically like your birth chart for the month and how you're going to be feeling, what you're going to be focusing on, all of the different things. And then we do like coaching on top of that. So that's me in a
Yay.
nutshell.
I have one follow-up question. I want to honor those folks who may not be on Instagram. Is there another way that they can connect with all your links and things should they not be on that platform?
I would go on my podcast, the Astrology Magic podcast, and I have all my links under there. But I will also give you my link tree because my link tree has all of my links. And I will be having a website in the coming year. I'm talking to Eric soon, eventually. I just have not, I don't know, it hasn't felt right yet to make a website. Like I know I'm going to have one. I just haven't been like, it's time yet. So
Maybe you should cast a chart.
I probably will. Take that to
I didn't
probably, I
think there
will.
would ever be an opportunity for me to make a sarcastic astrology joke to you. That moment was epic.
That was so good.
Rachel, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for being you and being vulnerable and being authentic. Thank you for your dedication to astrology and to doing the inner work, to loving consciously, to Ryan, to all of the things that you embody and are dedicated to. I'm so grateful that you vibrated into my sphere and that you were here today to bring this astrology magic into the sphere. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was so fun having this conversation with you. And I just think you're just so freaking awesome. So,
I received that. And to our listeners, I will put all of these links in the show notes. I will get Rachel's link tree and definitely check her out, connect with her. Even if you're not quite ready for a birth chart reading, like I said, her content is premium and it's really helpful. So thank you again, Rachel. I love you. And I know you'll be back on here soon with Ryan. We are starting our new Loving Conversation series where we're inviting on other conscious couples to talk about that because there's not a lot of content out there about that. And so we really want to help bring to people how those of us in the trenches navigating conscious relationships are doing it. So more to come from Rachel when she's back with Ryan. Thank you all so much for being here.